Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Beaten Path. Today we're traveling out to Minneapolis, Minnesota to visit the headquarters of Nordic Shells. Nordic began making shells in 2017 under the direction of founder and president Dave West. Since then, Dave and his team have been using state-of-the-art equipment and a proprietary process to supply the industry's top and up-and-coming drum brands with the shells they need to build amazing sounding and looking drums. I've personally relied on Nordic for a number of years now in the drums I've put together for myself, and have nothing but great things to say about the shells and the company. Before we get too far into the video, I want to remind you that I'm creating new episodes in this series each month, so make sure to subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on all of my future video releases. And without any further ado, let's take a look inside Nordic Shells.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for having us here today.
Yeah, glad to have you here. I'm Dave West, the founder of Nordic Drum Shells, and I'm really happy to give you guys a quick tour of the entire shop. This is the break room. Pretty exciting. Get to play little drums on your break.
Yeah, not many offices have a drum set in the break room.
No, not in the boardroom. Yeah, it's pretty fun now. Every once in a while, we used to have a bass amp set up too and a guitar amp, and so they'd kind of jam for a few minutes during lunch, but not anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to start way at the end here, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how we manufacture these beautiful drum shells from scratch, one at a time. So follow me. We're loosely set up here to manufacture based off the Toyota method of manufacturing, where we have all of our raw goods coming into this door. They get set in here for at least 2 months at a time. And then they go through in a U shape to get manufactured, processed, and either sit on the shelf or go out to the customer or client. We're going to start over here into the veneer room, and I'll show you what happens in here. We've got about probably 40 plus different species of wood in here. This is what we call our 360-degree humidification room. We like to keep this room at about 55, 60 degrees to about 55% humidity. That keeps the wood at its best, basically. We've got some Michigan maple right here from Don Sadler. This is cut at what's called a 50 by 99 piece, full piece space, cut at a 1/36 of an inch, basically like a nice heavy sheet of paper. This is probably our standard stuff. We use maple probably 80% of what we build at least. But anyway, there's all kinds of stuff in here. There's mahogany, okume, cherry, walnut, red oak, poplar, everything.
Each one of these species of wood, you have to kind of have a personalized touch to a degree with how you treat it and work with it.
Yeah, it gets, so the woods get complex. Not only, are they have different strengths, they have different density and fiber structure. All of that stuff kind of comes into play during the manufacturing process. And of course, eventually for the tone of the drum. So all these different woods, they're not cut at the same thickness. And that's one of the challenges in manufacturing drum shells. If you imagine a drum shell being made as a nesting doll, you have an outside diameter, and then as you put more layers in, it gets smaller and smaller, which the inside diameter has to be shorter and shorter. So what happens is if you're using a thicker pieces of wood, or 2 different thicknesses of wood, or 3 different thicknesses of wood, those change the outside diameter, which will change the circumference of the inside. Again, I'll go into more detail, but the thing I wanted to say about this room is a lot of these woods are around a 1/36 of an inch cut, but they range anywhere from a 1/50th to a 1/16th. So you can see here, this is red oak. This is cut at a 1/38th of an inch, which is pretty thin. And then this is a poplar 1/16th. So this is about 1.25 of a mil, and this is probably 0.67 of a mil. So you can clearly see that there's quite a difference here.
I always thought there was some crossover that if you were good at math, you might be good at drums, but I never really predicted it with the shell construction.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I didn't either. I thought, okay, we got these presses and, you know, it's just woodworking. We cut these up, throw them in there. But the reality is, in order to make the shells, at the scale we're doing and the quality that we're doing, it's a lot of math. When we're going to make a drum shell, we're going to make ply. That's the first step in doing all this. We're going to go over here to the ply station, and I'll show you how that gets done. So what we do is we take a piece of that long grain 136 maple, and he's going to end up pulling that on the table, applying glue to that, and then eventually adding these pieces here. It's the same wood, we just cut it in half to make the short grain. As you can see here, he's going to end up applying the glue on there, taking these sheets, putting them on there, stapling them in the proper format, and then putting them in that machine back there. It's about a 3-minute cycle, about 200 degrees and about 3,000 pounds per square inch. And what it does is it compresses and heats up the glue to create a solid to make the plywood. Now you're probably asking, why is he rolling that by hand? It looks like a lot of work. One, it is a lot of work. Two, it's because this is how we do our quality control. Depending on the types of woods and the combinations that we're using, they need different amounts of glue. Poplar, for example, is going to absorb a lot more glue than, say, maple or something even harder. So by doing it this way, instead of using a glue roller, we're ensuring basically consistency between the different formulas that we have to make in order to make these different combinations of drum shells. A single ply is simply just one sheet of veneer. This is a piece of 2-ply. A sheet of 3-ply would be a short grain, a long grain, and a short grain. And those are the typical configurations that we use to create our drum shells. So what Jake's doing is he's doing the long cutting portion, which is taking that ply, cutting it down into the rough cut shapes that will resemble the drum that it's going to be. This is very important because this is where all the detail happens, where they label each job and they decide on what's going to be the A layer, which is the outside face, and what's going to be the inside face. Very important to discern for quality control. So this is a very important part here where they're kind of putting together these packs so that they're ready to go for the next station, so that they know exactly what job this is for and what size shell they need to cut this at. So after the ply gets pressed and it gets cut into the long cuts and batched together, ready to be cut into a shell, it goes into the station here, which we call the shortcut station. So these packs are ready to get cut down into the exact lengths that they need to be in order to get into the presses. So right now, Michael's going to be cutting an A layer, which is the outside face, the longest piece of the drum shell right now. We record every drum shell that we make to ensure that it meets our standards. And the reason that we do that is to make sure that there's basically consistency from the mills to make sure that that thickness is what we need it to be to match all of our numbers, so that, again, it makes the perfect shell when we go through the rest of the manufacturing process.
And each layer is going to get slightly smaller.
Exactly.
Right, so.
Each subsequent layer will be just a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter. And it'll be really obvious when we get to the next stage over here.
Yeah, Michael, I'm the shop manager here at Nordic. So we're going to show you how we roll up these shells, get the glue on there, and put it in the press. So everything at this point's been cut to length. Usually we'll have a run of about 40 to 50 of these ready to go, about 4 to 5 different sizes. So this is a 22-inch 7-ply shell. So 3 layers. We've got the 2-ply long grain face, short grain on the inside. The 3-ply is a short, long, short. And then the inside layer is going to be the same as the outside. 2-part glue. It's got a resin and a hardener. So once we mix it up, we've got about 3 to 4 hours working time on it. The biggest goal with this is to obviously keep a really nice even layer of glue for consistency, but also to keep the glue off of the table where that face of the shell is. And by doing that, keeping glue off of these seams on the face layers, and by keeping glue off the table, we're keeping it off the face, which means less work for the builder when they're going to do their sanding, put lugs on and that kind of stuff. The cleaner I can keep these shells, the less work we have to do later. Instead of applying glue to the top of the B side here, the way we did the A layer, we'll actually do it to the underside. So again, just real nice and even, nice coverage. It doesn't really take a lot. It's nice to have a little bit of squeeze out, but too much is unnecessary, and again, could just cause more work with trying to clean up a shell once it's out of the press. So there's a surprising amount of technique involved in this, even though it is just a, Home Depot paint roller. Once you get pretty fast with this, you can keep things pretty clean and delicate as far as keeping glue where you want it to go and keeping it from where you don't want it to go. So now at this point, I've got glue everywhere, nice good coverage, no dry spots. So I'm gonna flip this over, do about the same distance of stagger as I did with those first 2 layers, and now it's ready to go. So you can see if I had put glue on that B layer right here, when I go to wrap this together, it would end up squeegeeing all that into that seam, but since it's on the underside, it keeps it really nice and clean. And you can see I've got a nice clean inside face, nice clean outside face, not a lot of glue going on. And that's how it's going to come out. So again, usually we've got about 5 presses going at once with these timers on 13-minute cycles. And again, the whole point of keeping a nice good log and catalog of all of our links for all the different formulas for clients, for all the online stuff we keep in-house with our True Inherited series, is that we have really nice consistent gaps. So we want really nice tight gap on the outside layer and inside, and enough kind of give and space to kind of let things expand as they need to. Because if one of these inside layers ends up being too long, it'll create a gap on the outside layer, which again is just gonna make an ugly shell. Put the inside caul to help just spread out the pressure evenly. It makes a nice clean shell without any ridges on the inside. And then we're ready to just squeeze her together here. Comes together, and then you can see as this drops down, it's gonna create pressure outwards. And so we've got a whole lot of hydraulic force keeping this thing laminated. And so with that glue, it's going to cure like glass. It's called a glassing effect. It's so sharp, it'll cut you sometimes. You gotta be pretty careful. So this is a 22-inch deep press. So it's gonna get cut down to 20 inches to get rid of kind of the glue squeeze out and any little stagger here. You can see this ended up pretty good. It's nice and flush. And that all comes from the process we've got of cutting these to width. We're referencing off the same edge all the way around so that, really this one, as it comes out, you could just sand it flat, have some to work with. The moisture content of the wood itself is kind of hanging around 8 to 10%, but when it goes into the press, it's drying out really bad. So one thing we do when we take it out, a really simple process is just kind of give it a nice little mist. One thing that does is cool it down and help it keep its shape, which it doesn't need a lot of help because of the way that glue works, since it hardens up like glass. But it does help to cool it down, give it a little bit of moisture. The wood can kind of then absorb that, prevent any cracking or checking from happening, and then sort of just temper it. You can see a little bit of steam's coming off right now. Nice tight gap on the inside. Every single 22-inch 7-ply shell is gonna, as far as banging it and getting a resonance of the shell, is gonna ring the same note every single time. And that comes from the consistency that we have within our process.
That's exactly what sets us apart, is that consistency and basically having that artisan approach at a high volume, which is very, very challenging to do. But these guys are doing a great job at that. Like I said, they're making about 700 to 800 shells per month by hand with this process. So it's pretty impressive. So what's really interesting is we have all these presses here, and each one of these presses only does one size. Not terribly efficient, but it's an excellent piece of machinery.
Yeah, and I imagine there's not a lot of functions for machinery like this outside of drum shells.
No, unfortunately, this 6-inch only makes a 6-inch shell. There's you can maybe use it as a pencil holder. I don't know.
Yeah, there's limited functionality. So like I imagine getting this machinery or like whatever industrial manufacturer you work with to supply these, do you get a little bit of say in development, or can kind of?
You do, for sure. And luckily there's 2 manufacturers in the world that will make drum presses that I'm aware of, and they're both in Taiwan. This is one of them. You can see if we go around the corner, there's a green one. That's the other manufacturer. So one manufacturer uses green, the other uses this white and blue. Just happens to match our colors. This is the other manufacturer. They do the exact same thing. This one is built like a tank, and this one's built like a Toyota. But they both do the same thing. Heat, time, and pressure creates the drum shell. So we just added services for the consumer side. So on our website, you're able to buy the shell you want. We can cut it down, we can sand it, we can add re-rings to it, put a bearing edge on there, and snare bits if you need to. So this is from that other manufacturer. This is our shell cutter. It's got two circus-like saw blades that come out, cut the shell perfectly square. This is a lifesaver when we're trying to cut 60, 70, 80 shells in a day. We used to have to use the saw stop table saw here, which is good. We're really efficient with that, but this machine over here just makes life a lot easier, especially cutting hoops. Takes a while. Creates a lot of efficiency. So you can see some of the scraps actually left over from cutting the shells already this morning. We can also sand it for you. We can add a re-ring, do bearing edges. Here's our library back here of all shells. So this is where everything you guys see online, that gets stored here. So we've got everything from our ash, birch, cherry, mahogany. There's some walnut down there, our maple, and then of course our heritage series where we've got the ribbon mahogany poplar, the regular mahogany poplar, and a maple poplar. What's the difference between an ash versus a birch, or a birch versus a maple, and so on? Of course, the Janka scale is one way to kind of get an idea of these woods and their hardness level and get a kind of an idea of what they may sound like. But there's a lot of variables. For example, the thickness of the veneer comes into play because that adds mass or has less mass to it. And then, of course, the configurations, a 6-ply, an 8-ply, or a 10-ply. All the domestic woods that we carry come in what's called a whole piece space. And if you remember back in the veneer room, I kind of showed you, it looks like one giant sheet of paper. Stuff that we get, like this mahogany that comes from Africa, the trees just aren't wide enough. And so the mills make one giant sheet, but it's kind of spliced together. And you can see this here where the grains kind of go two different directions. We try to center these on the mahogany shells, obviously for aesthetic reasons, but it does get challenging. We're trying to manufacture, 60 of these in a day. This is how it comes after it's been processed and cut. There's no glue on this thing, and that's just because of the way we do everything by hand. So I was just picking these up. These look like 8-ply maple 14s. But what's great because of this process is, that's a note. Exact same note. Again, it's just as the process of how we manufacture these. Yeah, there's no gaps, perfect seams. That's what we do here. It sets us apart is we're making a musical heirloom quality drum shell. Wood is extremely challenging to work with. Some of the feedback we get is that sometimes there's a sugar mark or something in there. And I'm like, well, it is a natural product. This was living, about 8 months ago. This was in the forest somewhere. This is birch, that's birch. This is birch. Nature does what nature does, We just do our best to try to control the variables, like with that humidification room. And again, do everything by hand and record everything that we do so that we can manage, all of these variables as best as possible to create consistency. Here's some of the fun stuff. In our signature series, we have a waterfall babinga, a straight babinga. This is our bird's eye maple on maple, and then a curly maple on maple. This stuff is really cool. This isn't terribly exciting, but this is where all the heritage series lives. Our ribbon mahogany, our maple poplar, and our standard mahogany poplar. We've been trying to switch to what's called the pull method, where we have less items on the shelf and make everything to order to create even greater consistency when someone orders like a full kit, for example. That's going to be our greatest method to give you the best product We love having these things at will to be able to sell, but it's going to be a lot easier if we do make to order, because it's going to be, I think the customer's going to be a lot more satisfied. This is where we store all the maple hoop stock. So basically, just like our shells, we got to make everything in a full tube. So when you order a 10-ply maple hoop, to say for a 22, it's a full stack here, and we end up cutting off what you need, whether it's 1 7/8, 1.5, 2 inch. But yeah, this is where we keep all of our maple hoops. I get a lot of questions where people are saying, what's the difference between a 6-ply and an 8-ply? Well, aside from the 2 plies, there's a huge sonic difference here. This 6-ply rings out probably at like 62 hertz or so. This is the 8-ply version of that same one. You can hear the difference, right? Yeah. This is somewhere around 82 or 84 hertz. A 10-ply shell. This one's like almost like a half step or something. We've got the new Maple Gum series, our Heritage Maple Gum, 6-ply, 6 mil, our modern version of the Jasper shell, which we've had so many requests for, and we finally just turned it into a product. We've also got another line coming out soon that'll be our version of the replica of the Made in Japan shells. Something else that we're going to release later this year is the snare kits. So you'll be able to pick out any snare you want on our website, pick out the hardware for it, and assemble on your own. We're pretty excited about that because we do have a lot of requests for that as well. And we kind of think that that's going to help even just like the weekend warrior or the professional drummer that just wants to try it on their own and make their own snare. So we're excited to launch that. And yeah, a lot of good things coming. A few exotic snares also coming out later this summer. So yeah, check back often. Here at Nordic, we have kind of 3 segmented groups. Our True Series drum shells, which are manufactured with the same wood all the way through. It's all grade A quality. So for example, if you order a birch shell, it's all birch all the way through. Same with the cherry, mahogany, walnut, etc. So the Heritage series is our version of the classics, basically. So we have the Maple Gum series, which is kind of like the Jasper shell. We have a Maple Poplar. We have a Mahogany Poplar, and then a Ribbon Mahogany Poplar. Those are all pretty vintage style drums. The other series we have that I personally like, that's kind of exciting, is the Signature series, where we have our Bird's Eye Maple, Curly Maple, a straight Babinga, and a waterfall Babinga series. We have had teak, we've had Mappa Burl, we've got I think a candy stripe Paduke coming up in a zebra series. So lots of fun there. We kind of like to try to mix it up, and we're gonna dive more into that exotic series a little bit as we get through the year. So fun stuff coming down the pipe. Definitely check us out. Yeah, thanks for coming down. I really appreciate it. You can always shoot me an email if you have any questions. Happy to help. Yeah, thanks a lot for your time.
All right. Thanks so much.